I would like to say that the discussion today is merely a discussion, and it's for intellectual and informational purposes only. We are not dispensing medical advice or even recommendations, particularly and specifically about what someone should do. Our overall and overarching advice is that people do their own research, they consult with their medical providers, and follow their own conscience in that way.
Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
I want to welcome you, everyone. This is Jerry Teo with the Healing Generations Institute, and want to welcome you once again to the Healing Generations podcast. And just glad that you decided to join us again today as we continue this journey that our ancestors before have laid before us towards becoming whole, becoming connected, fulfilling our sacred purpose, and being with each other in a good way. And so I want to begin today by thanking Creator and thanking those ancestors, all that came before. And I want to thank your ancestors too. So if we can just take a deep, deep breath and just call them in. Wherever you're at, be wherever you are is good. But let's acknowledge all those ancestors that have come before, that have blessed us, that have sacrificed for us, that have taught us, and that carry many lessons for us, carry many teachings, carry medicine for us. But they also carry the reminder of the journey, and that journey, especially for many indigenous people, people of color, African-rooted people, Native people, or people of many sources, have come with trauma, have come with hurt. And we are carrying the legacy of that still today, And that pandemic of racism and oppression and genocide is with us. But we are also with another pandemic, and that COVID-19 pandemic too. And sometimes we recognize that things are really interconnected and they merge. And so I'm really, really happy today that we have with us a friend. I consider him a brother. We work together. We do a lot of things together, share music together. We've trained together, done a lot of things. And he's been on with us before, but we asked Baba Kweli to come and just share some of his knowledge. This is a brother that's got deep knowledge. His knowledge of the historical sense of things is just immense, but also with just commitment, a commitment to love and integrity and justice. And so, Baba, I just want to thank you, for taking the time. I know you're busy with a lot of work, but also with that grandson and your own family and everything that you do. Besides that, Baba Kweli is a healing practitioner. He's a chiropractor and does a lot of work in this area of racial equity and racial justice and healing as well. So we're privileged to have him with us today, and just want to give you an opportunity to greet the folks today as we begin.
Thank you, Maestro. I appreciate this opportunity. This is a very crucial time for us because many of our people are suffering right now and are hurting a great deal. And everyone is being asked, I feel, to reach their own healing potential. I think everyone has a certain amount of healing ability. As we both know, in indigenous cultures, all the people participated in all of the ceremonies. You had certain people, of course, who led them and were more skilled, but everybody participated. And I think that in some respects, that is kind of being required of us today. Everybody is being asked to go into the depth of their own knowledge and their family wisdom and find ways in which they can soothe each other, heal each other, and really comfort each other, particularly with regards to what we face with this COVID COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, I mean, all of us have been touched in many, many ways, and some, personally with people in our families crossing over and passing on. But all of us know someone that has, been touched by this virus, and know people that have, been that we're grieving for. So we're in a time of grieving, a time of sadness, but also, a time of trying to figure out how do we regain our balance, and how do we heal. And recently the number of people that are very hopeful because there's a number of vaccines that have come to the forefront. And as people of color, we have a history of kind of not trusting the system, and not trusting sometimes healthcare, and not trusting things that come our way. And so it's created a dilemma in many, many communities of, should we trust the science? Should we trust the healthcare system? Should we trust this vaccine? And there's a whole history. And I know that you have a great knowledge of that history. I wonder if you can start off and begin to share a little bit about some of that history as it plays into the impact of what we're going through today.
Well, you're definitely correct in terms of the lack of trust, Maestro, because in many respects, we've been, particularly African, Indian, Native people, Mexican people, Puerto Ricans, poor people in general have been at times victims of medicine and victims of science. And that there's a very tortured history, I must say, with all of our peoples and medical sciences of the United States. There are instances where early settlers, particularly Sir Jeffrey Amherst, gave and recommended it even on a larger level, giving smallpox blankets to native populations to wipe them out, to aid their colonization. There's just a vicious history of medical complicity with white supremacy in terms of how they treated slaves, experimented on slave women. In fact, many of your herald figures in gynecology and obstetrics made their reputations experimenting on slave women, particularly Marion Sims. And then you had a doctor named Samuel Cartwright who came up with all kinds of incredible fictitious names for diseases. If a slave tried to run away, that gained a disease name, drapetomania or something. And it showed that science, while it does have, say, an unconditional and a objective, rational level, it, as medicine too, can be steered and skewered toward political means. And so much of my message lately has been trying to arm our people with the knowledge and the history so that we can be critical, but at the same time look at each specific historical instance separate and look at all of the parameters around it separate from the history when we're making our decisions. It's kind of like we know the history, but then we're going to look at each particular case. So with regards to vaccinations, I tell people that a lot of times right now, particularly because you have had the Tuskegee experiment, for instance, where United States government participated in an experiment from 1932 to 1972 where they infected 400 African-American men with live syphilis. And it was a longitudinal study to see what the effects of tertiary or third-degree syphilis would be. And even though penicillin came out 15 years before the ending of the study, they were denied penicillin or any kinds of treatment. And so many of these men died, became blind. And it's just an incredibly bad white mark on the medical system that people remember.
Yes.
People, and this was just a few years ago. So, those of us in our 60s, we remember that time, And then you had in the 30s, forced sterilization of thousands of Puerto Rican, Mexican, and Native American women. Over 20,000 in 64 alone.
Wow.
So these real instances give people caution and pause on a real level, to ask the question, is what you're telling me the truth? What you're giving me really good for me? So the case is, These historical examples show that with each political situation, the medicine can be turned and switched given what they want to do. So, medicine played a part in white supremacy and oppression of our peoples? Most definitely. Has medicine also helped and at times come to the aid of our people and disadvantaged communities, particularly in the form of our own physicians and healers? Yes, most definitely. So I tell people to look at the whole picture. For instance, both science and vaccination and medicine, all three of them, have their roots in ancient past and within indigenous cultures. A lot of times we reject these three entities because we think they are European or that they're totally white. And that's not the case. You think about the early navigations going from islands in Polynesia, for instance, building the Aztec pyramids and then the Egyptian pyramids. That architectural knowledge, that's science. Navigation techniques is science. Tracking animals is science. So we invented science too.
Yeah.
Medicine goes back to ancient Egypt and China and all of our cultures, you see. Even vaccinations, and that's the point I want to get to. Vaccinations have their origin in China and Western Africa. The slaves that were captured and brought to the New World, they knew that if you cut a cowpox pustule and spread some of the pus on an open cut, that person would not either not get smallpox or get a lesser case. And there's a particular instance in 1721 when a slave named Onesimus shared these techniques with Cotton Mather, who was head of the Puritan and Pilgrim community there. And the people that followed his advice only died at a rate of 2%, whereas the overall rate was well over 14, 15%. So you have these cases, and in China, they knew about inoculation, what they call variolation. And that's why I have the thing where I titled it Debunking the Myths. There's a myth that vaccination, science, and medicine also are not ours. And we have to kind of look at that and look at each case separately. And today it brings us to this point.
Right. Well, no, I know, and that we are brilliant in terms of science. I mean, historically, all of our indigenous cultures had before Europeans, before even contact, we had a way of being in the world. We have a way of interconnecting with the world. We had a way of connecting with the solar system, and I mean, in the pyramids in Mexico, the sun comes right through the middle. I mean, the exact proportion of how we built things was based on science. The concept of zero, the concepts of the constellations, and how we planted, the whole system of planting on a chinampa, on a floating garden that many people thought was agriculturally unsound. We knew how to do that. We knew how to grow organically, if you will, and knew when to plant what seeds together, so that we knew that certain plants assisted other plants, and then of course medicine. I mean, the whole aspect of how we healed and cured each other, right? Because at one time there was no Western science, there was no Western medical professionals, and still today in many communities, you go to some communities in Mexico, there's no Western doctors over there. You have
Right.
the medicine people or the curanderos that are there. So I agree. I think that definitely, the sense of healing, the sense of curing, the sense of medicine, the sense of using plants, and the sense of using preventative measures and even curative measures. Because when somebody's sick, you take them to a healer, and they will get whatever's necessary, from the plants or, from the water or whatever, mix it together, say their prayers, do their rituals, and the person gets well. So medicine and healing is integrated, an integral part of all of our cultures. I think the problem is that even within Western medicine, and I think this is the the kind of the rub or the difficulty, is we know because of racism and because of oppression and because of all of those things, many people of color, their immune systems have been compromised. And so we're experiencing COVID at a higher rate. And in many of our communities, we talk about medical assistance, there are not the same resources. So that combination, it really kind of, in many of our communities, many times makes us not trust or not rely on or not even be used to going to a doctor first, So can you speak to a little bit about that? Because I think that's part of the questioning, of how do we deal with this issue? How do we get ourselves well? And should we participate? Should we participate in getting vaccinated? Should we participate in, and people are struggling with knowing what to do.
Yes, it is. It's a quandary. But I tell people though that given the statistics right now, Indians, Alaska Natives, and Latinos have a 3.9, basically a 4 times chance of getting COVID than whites. African Americans have a 3.6 times chance of getting it. African Americans die at a rate twice that of whites, and Indians and Alaska Natives and Latinos 1.5 times. And that does have something to do with the fact that the two main comorbidities, diabetes and heart disease, are also our two most lethal killers in our community. So that's why, given the potential lethality of this disease, is why we have to look at things very seriously with regards to this vaccine.
Right.
Now, when we talk about vaccines, there have been some horrendous blunders. Okay, and I tell people, we're not going to ignore that. In 1932, with the first smallpox vaccine in Lübeck, Germany, over 100 and something kids died. The first yellow fever vaccine didn't go well. There was an accident in 1952 with regards to the first polio vaccine. But as you know as well, Maestro, we're the same generation. Our parents and all of us, we were very happy to take the polio vaccine when we first went to school in the first grade. I remember personally, in every class, there was a kid with those brown boots and those little braces. And we were deathly afraid of polio. And so there have been some successes. Polio has basically been wiped out. It's wiped out in the United States 1994 and the world in the last few years. Smallpox has been virtually wiped out, as well as yellow fever, typhoid, and diphtheria. So there have been some successes. What is different about this particular vaccine and period is that this is one of the first times actually in history that a vaccine was tried out primarily on wealthy, upper middle class people. Almost all of the vaccines in the past, and this is part of the deplorable history, were tried on developmentally challenged children, so-called retarded children were the test cases, or kids in orphanages, or people in old folks' homes and in insane asylums. But because of COVID's lethal nature, rich people were signing up. And very few of our people really were in these first trials. So I tell people that, meaning what? If this was dangerous, it was not going to affect us first. There would be a first line of people. We would already know. We would see thousands of people dying or having severe complications that don't look like us first. So that's one of the things I tell people. Then secondly, there has been some advance in how they make vaccines. In the past, they had to actually capture live vaccine, grow it in a lab, and have enough of it there to make actual live vaccine, which means they would put a little bit of actual live tissue in there. Today, it's done differently. They take a synthetic version, they take the mitochondrial RNA and inject that into the person. That mimics the disease. The person then develops an antibody to that. And that generally has been, at least in this recent trials, has lessened the amount of side effects. For instance, the Moderna and Pfizer both have fairly mild side effects, meaning what? A little fever, a little soreness in the arm. For some people, they might get a slight cold. 95% effective. There is a population that can't take them, though. And that is people who've had an allergic reaction, particularly to a shot before. Meaning if they've had a shot and they've had an anaphylactic reaction, meaning their tongue swole up, their face swole up, and their hands, then they may not be able to take this. Actually, I've actually had such a reaction with oral penicillin before myself. In fact, I think that's the origin of the Frankenstein myth, because I saw myself just transform in the mirror into a monster, where my hand was big as a catcher's mitt, my face was just huge.
When you took penicillin?
And this was just taking oral penicillin, yeah. And a little Benadryl knocked it right out. So in my case, I've had the first vaccination. So in my case, they made me stay 30 minutes as opposed to 15 minutes. And the only side effect I've had thus far was just a little bit of arm soreness. So at the end of the day, am I recommending personally that people take this vaccine? My answer is yes. And it's yes, though, with being fully convinced with their own study and their own research. I don't recommend anybody to take it just on anybody else's hearsay or advice. They need to be convinced themselves, because here's the deal. Part of healing is your having your mind in concert with thinking that what you're doing is going to heal you.
Right.
As a chiropractor, I hear this so often. Often people, by the time they get to my office, sometimes they're 50% better because I have a referral practice. So they've been referred by somebody who had good results. So by the time their mind starts kicking, I'm gonna get better. And that has a part to play, you know. Placebos actually help sometimes when people think it's real. So I tell people to do what it takes to either convince themselves or to convince themselves to not take it, but do their own homework. And today with the internet and all of these podcasts and webinars, there's no excuse for not being informed. And so I tell people, don't be intimidated by medical terminology or scientific articles. If you don't understand a word, get you a dictionary or call somebody and ask them, I've just read this article, run it by them, but feel empowered that all of us can understand pretty much all of this knowledge, The last point I want to make, in the 19th century, there was an itinerant physician named Samuel Thompson. He started training people in what he called the Thompsonian method. And they were basically eclectic natural healers. And their position was everybody can have as much knowledge that they need to heal themselves. So they started doing home physiology, anatomy, and pharmacy classes. And I tell people today, we're in an empowered age. We're in a technological age. If there's something that we need to know, then we have the ability to get that. And so I encourage all of us to not shy away from medical articles or anatomy or physiology. Dive into it.
Yeah. So let me ask you a couple of questions that I've been thinking about and have been asked. I've been in discussions with folks. One of the things that you mentioned is that the clinical trials were done mainly on people, I guess, that had means and weren't people of color, right? So there's not the clinical trials on African American people or Native people and Mexican. On how does that play into the efficacy of and the testing of this vaccine on people of color?
Well, that is a good question, and it is one that they raise as well, because they didn't intentionally try many pregnant women either, and they're wondering how it works with that population. I guess the explanation that they give that seems plausible to me, though, is that essentially at the end of the day, we're all the same. The differences, of course, is in our comorbidities and our vulnerabilities. Right. Now, you're correct. Those kinds of things can't be measured. And the fear factor.
Yeah.
Okay, because a lot of African people and Native people just don't even like shots. So the idea of the shot and the fear factor and the lack of trust also factor in to some extent, possibly at least on the efficacy. But at the end of the day, I think that the similarities of the human genome basically being the same, and that's why they can even do it on our cousins, the apes, because they're 98% the same as well as us. So that's probably their explanation. And then some of these other factors would probably account for what really is the difference, though, is the accessibility. Even if we want the vaccine,
Right. Right.
many of our people are having a hard time getting it.
Right. Yes.
And so that raises a whole nother issue of equity and availability.
Yeah.
Because now they're saying poor people may not get the vaccine until 2022. And so this is really the travesty of our American system, that if something is deemed good, that the people who need it the most are the last to get it.
Right. Right. What is your knowledge about long-term effects? I mean, other vaccines or other medicines. I mean, on the short term, obviously there's some good that we see. What is the history on the long-term effects? Are there vaccines or medicines that have been given out that later on, years down the road, there's some negative consequences that we've seen with I see these commercials sometimes. If you took this medication and didn't, or whatever, come see me. And they're lawyers, of course, but I'm just wondering if there's any historical context to any of that.
Well, that's a good question. In terms of historical long-term effects of vaccines, I'm not sure. The problem with it is that vaccines don't really have long-term often effects because they don't have long-term efficacy. And for instance, this one, they saying within a year,
Take it
you
again.
may need a booster. I do know that the long-term effects of COVID now are being kind of discovered, and they are kind of scary because they go to cognitive difficulties. 10% of the people are having psychotic breaks. Hearing problems, taste problems, vision problems. COVID is truly the disease from hell. I mean, in many respects, it's a genius disease. I mean, when we think about it in terms of it has the right combination, at least right now, of lethality, its ability to kill, and its ability to spread. And because the disease, if it's too lethal, it won't spread as much, like Ebola.
Right.
And if it's not that bad, the host can conquer it. So this little COVID is quite a challenge in many respects. And so that's why this vaccine, I think, given, and even the question marks. So for instance, it was rushed through.
Right.
And that has hardly ever been done before. So there are still some question marks because they did 2-month trials when they generally do 6 months to a year trials. And so there is some risk involved. And that's why I tell people, do your homework.
Yes.
Talk to people. Talk to your physicians. Talk to your physicians of color, people that you trust. That's what I tell people, and ask them, have you had it? Have you taken it? That's the bottom line.
So when you get the vaccine, so let's say, I get the vaccine, what is it? Does it stop COVID? Does it reduce the symptoms? Does it, and you mentioned for, I guess, up to a year, but what is actually, if you get the vaccine, what does it do for you? Because I've heard different things. A lot of people say, well, if you get COVID now, you can go out and you don't have to worry about getting infected by COVID. You're not going to have the symptoms. You're not going to carry it. And then I've heard on the other end, what it really does is if you do get COVID, it reduces your symptoms and the impact of COVID on you. So can you clarify that in terms of the?
Well, to the best of my ability, you're correct. They don't know if it totally prevents it. The biggest question mark, from what I gather, is that they don't know if it prevents transmissibility. And so that is the scariest part of it, that you could not have any symptoms or even have the disease, but still could be a carrier, which means the issue of masking is still going to be
Around for a while.
pertinent and going to be around a while, regardless of the amount of people that are vaccinated. It's not going to be kind of like when we had polio vaccine and you can just see it go away.
Right.
This is going to be a little trickier. And then you have the issue of the variants.
Yeah.
Right now, they feel that the vaccines will work against the variants. But if the variants change enough, and it's all about receptors, the idea, the whole way these things work is that it's kind of like a lock and a key mechanism. And they're trying to build another lock or key to fit this lock. And the virus is trying to out trick the locksmith. Basically, the virus said, "Oh, you're trying to figure out my combination. I'm going to switch up this receptor and put this little red dot here where it was a blue dot."
Right.
And the medicine thinking it's still that same, it may or may not work. So that's the part that we're going to be looking at if the variations change dramatically more. Right now, they don't think that the variations are severe enough to warrant a whole nother vaccine, you see. And let me just say this too. I'm not speaking as an expert on virology here. I'm speaking as an alternative health practitioner
Right.
who gives health advice.
Right.
And I tell people this because I do feel it's important that you respect the limits of your knowledge.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't treat infectious disease,
Right.
but I treat people who have infectious disease.
Yeah.
So these things I have to understand because, as a holistic practitioner, everything is connected.
Right. Well, and I hear you, Baba, and I really appreciate you being willing to share the knowledge that you have. And I think what I hear you saying is do your own research. The knowledge that we're sharing here is one piece of knowledge, but continue to learn and continue to ask questions and explore. And as a holistic practitioner, I appreciate you sharing. Listen to your spirit. What does your spirit say about this? Do you feel in line with this? Is this something that you feel is going to be good for you? And I think that really is the way our indigenous ancestors would answer, because there's medicines, all kinds of different medicine.
That's
And
right.
and this is one opportunity with this vaccine. I know what I've seen with a number of people is this is giving people hope. There's a sense of hope, and people are getting it and feel, oh man, I'm better now, and I'll share with you my own thinking too, because I've seen, I've heard and from folks that I know and relatives that have gotten COVID and have long-term effects. It lingers. It's not just the 2 weeks that you quarantine and you're done. No, they're still having trouble with their smell. They're still having trouble, remembering things. They're still having trouble sleeping. They're still having a certain level of anxiety, and so I think that is the real issue, because if you can prevent that, if you can prevent those long-term effects, then for some people it may be worth it to take the risk, if you will, and to trust the science, but again, I think you mentioned it and I mentioned it here too, is you really need to listen to your own spirit, and at the same time, the vaccine is not going to cure everything. You still need to
Okay.
eat right. You still need to sleep good. You still need to
Okay.
take care of yourself. You still need to make sure that you're doing your own healing, eliminating stress in your life. All those things. Surround yourself with good people. And I know the most difficult thing right now is that we can't be with each other. You know, and I think it's amazing because relationships are like a vaccine. They
Mm-hmm.
inoculate us. People hugging us and loving on us
That's
and
true.
just being with people. And one of the things that I miss is not being able to do that with my grandchildren, or to be with the folks that I love and that support me as well. So, we're on this journey. And I think sometimes, we get these challenges. This is a big challenge. This has really stopped the world, right? And had us evaluate and reflect on what is important in our life. Relationships are important in our life. What is important in our life? The elders are important in our life. What is important? We're recognizing the inequities from racism and white supremacy. They're coming to roost now. We're seeing, people of color that are really suffering a tremendous amount. So, you talked about truth. That sense of truth is now, coming forward. And I think we need to take the opportunity of taking the truth that is coming forward so that we can create a world that really is healthy for all people. So, I'm wondering, as a holistic practitioner, if there are some other things that you can offer to people in terms of advice, in terms of how to take care of themselves, how to boost their immune systems, how to just be well in the world, and you have so much knowledge and so much wisdom and practice. I wonder if you could offer some of those teachings.
Well, one of the most practical things really is sunshine, because, and you mentioned that, because vitamin D shortage has been shown to be linked with people's getting more serious cases of COVID. So vitamin D, either taking it as a supplement and or 5 to 10 minutes of direct sunshine a day. Also, they've mentioned melatonin as being possibly helpful. Melatonin is one of the precursors that helps us sleep. And it is sometimes helpful when people have insomnia and so forth. Well, it turns out melatonin binds to some of the receptors that COVID likes to bind to. So it kind of helps and blocks that. They also mentioned zinc
Yes.
doing the same thing. Several people have mentioned, and I found helpful, Iris sea moss, particularly helpful in terms of lung cleansing, as well as the herb mullein. But people must not forget what are the simplest things too: taking a walk, getting fresh air. The biggest problem right now is people sitting so much. And just like you see a stagnant pool of water, it festers, it smells bad. Well, just imagine, in your body, you're 75% fluid.
Yeah.
That stagnant pool within our bodies not moving around. So some of our vulnerability right now is being created with this lack of movement and this almost hibernation type of existence people are living.
Yeah.
So I've been recommending people to rediscover nature,
Right.
get out in the fresh air. And in fact, it's very interesting. When you go out on the trails right now, they're full of people.
Yeah.
Even black people are on the trails, which I used to remark, and we never saw black people, on the trails. And, most of our people, we have an interesting relationship with exercise. People who've worked in the fields, they laugh at you when you talk to them about exercising
They
and
do it all day
jogging and
long.
stuff like that. Yeah, they've been doing it, and they've relished a time when they didn't have to exercise
Right,
so
right,
much,
right, yeah.
So, but for many of us, urban dwellers and people who, make our livings with our minds and so forth, we have to get out and be a little bit more active and move. And, certain things have gone up. People have been drinking more alcohol during this time.
Yeah.
We have to check, and eating more sugars and sweets. People have been just, there's a natural tendency to gravitate toward comfort. Whatever is your comfort zone, people are going to it. And it is natural. So I don't want people to feel browbeat themselves. But at the same time, it's like, okay, just look at it like this. Okay, we've had 8 months of this. Let me just kind of like tighten up on the discipline tip right now. Because this could go on for quite a while. And I can't have this lifestyle forever.
Yeah.
So whatever self-corrective measures we have in ourselves, I think we need to employ them. I want to mention this too. One aspect that makes this vaccine more pertinent right now too, though, is that we may be able to catch COVID more than once. Right now in Brazil, the city of Manaus, Brazil, is experiencing a second huge wave after they thought they had achieved herd immunity back in April. They're now going through a huge wave, and they're suspecting that some of the people who had it then are catching it again. So this is something that, we want this to go away because it has killed. Just think about it. You've managed to live to 100 years old, and then some weird disease, almost like out of space, comes like COVID and takes you out. that's just a tragedy to me.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
person should have been allowed to just.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we know spiritually everything is in its own time,
Yeah.
and that our deaths are also,
Hmm.
you can't rush it and you can't speed it up,
Yeah.
you can't hold it off. So I wax and wane. I look at this COVID from the material end and just how devastating it is, and then I try to pull back and look at it too from a spiritual standpoint, and
Hmm.
and understand that it's part of our own undoing and how we've created this tremendous imbalance in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. It does give us though and it's a tragic look, but it really gives us a look at what our ancestors struggled with. I mean, our ancestors, millions of people were killed and wiped out. And we're struggling here with a tremendous amount of people that have died, and it's really affecting us in so many ways. But our ancestors went through this as well, and I know that's why my grandmother would pray every morning, and she would pray and give thanks for another day. But she would then come and bless us up, and she had her own vaccine. It was her prayer and her blessing, So I want to encourage people not to forget that vaccine. That vaccine that all of us have. We all have that vaccine of spirit and of love in this month, that we are celebrating Valentine's Day but also Black History Month, right? That we need to love ourselves, and we need to stand with those people that need blessings. And this month that is really about honoring those of African ancestry, we need to stand with you all. We need to stand together and bless each other up and come together, because that is the strongest vaccine. I mean, you all will choose, those people that are listening will choose whether this vaccine, if it vibes with you, if you feel it, then you should do it. But at the same time, whatever you choose, make sure you choose that vaccine of love, that vaccine of respect, that vaccine of honoring one another. That is the one that's going to get us through in spite of everything, right? And so I feel blessed, Baba, that you're in this world, that you're helping people. That I'll tell you, man, when there's been times when I had to go to my chiropractor, and man, when I just finish, I feel so much better. So much better that it feels strange to me sometimes, because I didn't know I was all crooked up, right? I didn't know I was that, but practitioners like you that dedicate themselves to helping people and healing people and making people feel better, many times are salvation, for those that have no hope. So this is also about a time of hope. How do we bring all those things together? I want to give you one last opportunity to share any final words or final advice or final blessing to the folks that are listening today.
Well, in addition to all of the values that you mentioned, I will mention one additional one, and that is forgiveness.
Mm,
This is a time where we have to try to forgive people,
yeah.
because we get a chance to truly miss our loved ones. We get a chance to truly see how valuable what you mentioned is, just in terms of touch.
Mm,
This has been like a evolutionary break in some
yeah.
respects. For instance, if something like this had occurred where early humans could not have touched each other and groomed and been with each other, say 280,000 years ago, we wouldn't be here right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Those things are that integral to us being human.
Mm,
So we get a chance right now to really appreciate those aspects. And I think that once this passes, we will have a whole different sense of togetherness, and at least for a moment, really appreciate each other
mm,
at a deep level.
yeah.
And I think one of the things that will forward that is right now in our hearts to forgive any and everyone and or anything that has wronged us or hurt us, and lighten our hearts
Mm,
a little bit.
mm,
I think
mm.
that would be the final remedy.
Wow, that's beautiful teaching, beautiful medicine, and I think you mentioned light in the heart. We need to release those things that burden us, that separate us, that keep us from being whole and circulating that positive energy within our universe. It doesn't mean that we can't still march for social justice and speak up where there's inequity. But I think we can do it with love. And I think we can do it with togetherness. And I think we can do it with an integrated sense of sacredness among all people. And thank you for,
Thank you.
for just who you are and everything that you and the Brotherhood of Elders just represent. And thank you for coming on today and sharing your knowledge. And I want to invite people to, as Baba has shared, to do your own research, check things out, research where you need to, and listen to your spirit about what you need to do to take care of yourself, to take care of your health, your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health, but to take care of each other as well. We're in this together. This journey is about all of us. And so as we move to closing today, I invite you to think about the lessons that we shared today, to continue to listen to this podcast. Give us a little bit of feedback if you'd like, share it with others, and lift us up that way. And you remember, our goal is to heal generations that way. And we offer you blessings. We offer you good health. And may your day be beautiful. Aho.
Ashe.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.